We would now begin with the last session of the conference, in which we will discuss solutions for SMEs, which continue to remain a largely untapped market for renewable power. For this session, we have with us Mr. Ashutosh Puntambekar, Senior Vice President and Head EFL, Mr. Rohan Shelar, Deputy Manager, Channel Business, LONGi Solar, Mr. NP Ramesh, Co-founder and COO, or Energy, Mr. Rajiv Chawla, Chairman of IamSMEofIndia. Mr. Chawla will be joining us shortly. Mr. Mridul Chaddha, Senior Manager Consulting, Bridge to India, would set the context for the discussion and moderate this session. Please send us your questions on the subject in the chat box, and we'll try to answer them towards the end of the discussion. Over to you, Mridul.
Thank you, Ankita. I'll start with thanking all the panelists and the attendees. A very warm welcome to everyone. I'll start with a quick presentation so as to give a background, a foundation to our panel discussion. So, as we all know, MSMEs play a very important role in our economy. They represent business investment worth up to 500 million rupees and bring in annual revenues of up to 2 billion rupees. They contribute around 50% to the exports in value and also contribute a third to the Indian GDP as well as the manufacturing output. They also account for around half of the power consumed by industries. And therefore, they hold a significant potential for solar power. And yet this potential has not been fully tapped. At just 13% of the total rooftop capacity, the share of MSMEs is even lower than the residential market. High grid tariffs in almost all the states make investment in solar rooftop systems a very major driver. It makes it financially attractive for MSMEs to invest in solar. But again, there are several challenges that they face. Financing has been a major challenge for a long time now. Issues related to credit rating, inability to offer collateral means that only CAPEX is a viable business model for MSMEs. There are issues with respect to lack of awareness about technology, regulations, system sizing, configuration as well, which leads to apprehension among the adopters. Small ticket size and lack of a resale market for equipment in case of default by the consumers has made the sector unattractive for the traditional lenders as well. But there have been some efforts across the board to make solar power investment attractive for MSMEs. We have seen in the last few months credit guarantee schemes being announced by USAID and World Bank. We will try to understand how these challenges are affecting the potential market players, the consumers, and how the installers and lenders are trying to navigate their way through these challenges. So I will start with Ramesh. Ramesh, I wanted to understand, we'll start from the basics. What is the typical system size for MSMEs, and does it vary significantly from manufacturing MSMEs to non-manufacturing MSMEs?
Typically, MSMEs, when we look at, you can separate it out to industrial and commercial, and the sizes in industrial can vary from 50 kilowatts and go all the way to megawatts. We have quite a lot of megawatt installations which have come, because many of them, now that the criteria for SME has been widened by the government of India last year, We find many of the industries now falling into the mid scale, and they are high power consumers, and we see them going for megawatts. In the commercial space, yes, the roof becomes a limitation. And so you would find that installations go between 20 and maybe 200, 300, maybe sometimes 500. In the commercial space, where I will see bigger installations are educational institutions, which can go even up to a megawatt because they have a lot of roof.
Okay. As I mentioned, financing has been a problem for a very long time. What are your experiences in terms of issues related to financing with these both large and small MSMEs? Are the problems similar in kind of consumers?
Usually financing is always a problem in the SME segment, and obviously as it gets to the middle scale segment, they would have they have their line of credit lined up with the banks. But when it comes to solar is capital intensive, and so for the customer to use his funds or use his collateral in order to finance this product becomes a challenge. He rather would like to use his collateral to borrow for his own improvement of his business. And so we use banks quite a lot, but at some point, somewhere around 4 or 5 years back, we decided that this is a significant piece of the puzzle that we need to control. And we got into financing, and we do collateral-free financing for SMEs. And, we go from zero down payment, many cases, between 0 and 25% down payment, and we go between 3 to 5 years. Typically, what we see is that the EMI, and we don't do a OPEX model where we charge per unit rate. We do an EMI model more like the banks. And the EMI is always lesser than the savings that the customer gets. And that becomes the critical point for them to really go. And we have done we have done about 150 odd systems over the last three years, I would say. More than 100 crores in terms of loan book. And it has been a significant driver because it takes away two things as far as the customer is concerned. One is technology risk, which is one of the major reasons why OPEX model is preferred. And second is it also gives them an easy payment methodology, which is more, it's just how we look at it is once you put your down payment, the EMI is anyhow you would have paid that amount to the electricity board. So instead of paying to the electricity board, you pay it to us. Yes. And you own the system after the tenure of the loan. Yeah.
I'll come back to you, Ramesh, on the nitty-gritties of the financing that you provide. I'll go to Ashutosh. Ashutosh, could you share with us some details about the lending structure that you offer, the kind of tenure, interest rates that you offer?
So, as an organization, we are almost solely focused on MSMEs. We've almost been in the industry for 3 decades now. Our sole focus has been MSMEs. The challenge here is, of course, as Ramesh also said earlier, and which most of the people know, is lack of collateral. A second challenge is in terms of the down payment that the customer has to make. Rather, they would put that money into working capital or save that money for a rainy day. We tried to work around these two challenges and try to figure out whether we can provide a solution. So, what we do currently is provide collateral-free loans. Loans can start from as low as 10 lakhs and can go up to as high as 1 crore, which is where, bulk of the MSMEs will fit. Beyond that, typically, either the MSME doesn't have that kind of size or the roof becomes a constraint. Tenures range from anywhere between 3 to 5 years. Exceptionally, we do 7 years, but most of the cases that we've done, most of the proposals that we've done so far are in the range of 4 to 5 years, because typically an SME in energy intensive industry will see a payback period of between 3 to 4 years. People generally don't want to pay interest beyond that. So that's the typical tenure that we look at. What has really helped is the collateral-free lending that we've started 6 months back. Because most of the collaterals are either mortgaged to the bank or given to the existing lender or are being used for other business expansion purposes. We presently are, lending all across the country. As I said, MSME is the focus. We are lending across industries, so be it commercial, be it hospitals, hotels, educational institutes, manufacturing, of course, remains our focus area because we are traditionally a machine financer. So that's a focus area for us. So far it has been a good experience. Of course, constraints remain, challenges remain, but the industry is evolving as we go along, and we hope to continue with the work that we're doing.
Okay. Ashutosh, you mentioned the tenure being 3 to 5 years. Are the EMIs anyway linked to the generation, as Ramesh mentioned,
Yes.
that EMIs are less than what the consumer would be paying to the DISCOM? Is that the same case with EFL as well?
Yeah, the effort is to do that. As Ramesh rightly pointed out, that's where the hook is for the customer to come to a financer. And so instead of paying the monthly electricity bill to the DISCOM, they pay an EMI to us. So there's hardly any difference for the customer. But in a few cases, the EMI might be slightly higher than the savings. But eventually, these are customers who understand the power of rooftop solar, power of savings, and they don't mind doing that because after 4 or 5 years, for the remaining 15-20 years, the installation is going to be profitable for them and completely loan-free for them. But in 90% of the cases, 90 to 95% of the cases that we've done so far, EMI is equivalent to the savings or maybe lesser than the savings. That's at least the endeavor on our part.
Okay. And how do you deal with the defaults? What kind of provisions do you have in the loan agreements? How much time do you give SME consumers to pay back if you have missed an EMI? And if it becomes a complete default, how do you get your money back, if at all?
So it's been 2 years since we started this business. So far, we haven't had any default. I think part of it is also to do with the customer behavior, where electricity payments typically get priority, right? So if a customer has to plan a certain cash flow, electricity payments earlier were getting priority, because if you don't pay electricity bill, the connection gets cut. That kind of discipline is there even today, even if it's an EMI system. So probably that is something which has kept the portfolio clean so far. We haven't had a single default. But in the worst case of a default, I think in a typical normal lending case, what you would do is seize the asset. Here, that's a challenge because a rooftop solar installation, dismantling that and selling it off is a big challenge.
Right.
So there are legal, of course, recourses. You have Section 138, which deals with check bounces. You have arbitration to fall back upon, which is a legal recourse. And of course, our policy as such is to engage with the customer. Let's say customer bounces one EMI. We engage with the customer and try and understand what's really the problem. Can anything be done? Can we continue with maybe 1 or 2 EMI bounces so that whatever situation that the customer is in, he tries to get out of that. But if it doesn't really work, then of course we have these legal recourses which we can fall back upon. Seizing of the asset is a bit of a challenge. As I said, so far we haven't had a single delinquency. We hope to continue with that. So we haven't really gone to that stage where we had to seize the asset so far.
Ramesh, could you throw some light on what kind of offerings do you have in terms of the lending structure, the tenure, interest rates? You already mentioned that EMI is equal to or less than the amount that consumers need to pay for the DISCOM. And then I'll move to a follow-up question.
Yeah, the tenure is between 3 and 5 years. Very rarely we go beyond 5 years. The amounts we go slightly higher. We go up to 5 crores. So for bigger systems, we go at an interest rate between 11.5 and 12.5. And yeah, that's the product offering. And we customize the down payment based on the customer. So we move anywhere between 0 and 25%.
Okay. And what impact have you seen over the last couple of years due to COVID? How much the demand has declined, and by when do you see the demand coming back to the pre-COVID levels?
I would say as of now, see, after the first wave shutdowns, demand did pick up. Actually, we did better in the last year. We did better than pre-COVID. And this year also, I find that even though the second wave was much worse, and I had my fears on how the customer sentiments would be, we found that the rebound is pretty good. And the customers, very quickly get back to, I think it's because they are not dependent on government or any other. This segment of SMEs knows that they have to be on their own. And so they quickly rebound back. And I would say that the demand levels are almost like pre-COVID. I have not seen much of a drop. It's pretty good now.
Okay. Ramesh, we are seeing, apart from the usual drivers, there is a growing sense of green mandates by the large procurers, which contract MSMEs for some of the products. For example, large companies like Apple, IKEA, they are issuing green mandates for their suppliers. Does the presence of such large companies impact your comfort level while offering debt to these companies?
I don't think so, because primarily, see, we work with the IKEAs, and we are in their empanel list, and we find that they bring customers to us. And so it's not necessary that they want to finance always. Sometimes they finance, and we as a company are also quite okay if they want to finance, because we do CapEx also. And, we do almost 60% CapEx and 40% credit. So it doesn't matter to us. We are more a solution provider, and finance is a part of the solution provision.
So those large companies may not necessarily be part of the execution at all, financing execution at all?
I have so far, even with IKEA, I have not seen them lending. They have said they have a pot of money which they can use, and they would like to do it at lower interest rates. Maybe something is in the works, so it could come up. We welcome it. It's primarily a sort of a push which these big companies would give to the smaller ones from whom they are buying to go for solar. And, sometimes the smaller companies need some sort of a push. And because prioritization, even though solar is cheap, everybody knows that solar is today cheaper than grid power. Not many of the MSMEs go for it. You showed in your first slide as it's only 13%. And there are reasons that you need some sort of a push, because the biggest thing I see is that MSME's bandwidth is very less. It's a big decision. Most often the solar is bigger than all their machineries in their plant, the cost of the solar plant. So it's a big decision. And so he would like to take time, but he doesn't have the time, because in a small industry, he has to take care of everything himself. And so sometimes a bigger company coming and saying that, okay, by this time frame, if you can have solar, it would help us, or it would be an important criteria for us to continue buying from you, is a important aspect as far as prioritization for the customer is concerned.
Okay. I'll come to Rohan now. Rohan, we were discussing about awareness being one of the challenges in the sector. Mm-hmm. And we were just discussing that there are larger companies which give green mandates to the suppliers. How aware a typical MSME consumer is with respect to modules, which is the largest share in a system in terms of cost? How aware are they, and how involved are they in selecting a module technology?
Definitely. Thanks for this nice question. So basically, if you see nowadays, there are a lot of people working around the MSMEs also. If you see, like Ramesh sir is there, Ashutosh is there, and if you approach for the solar, if you want to go ahead with the solar, there are a number of players who educate the clients nowadays. I have seen like we personally, like I'm taking care of the business, so which generally falls between 1 megawatt to 100 megawatt order sizing. And in that, I have seen that when I started discussing with the client, many a times they cross question us. They are keeping a lot of knowledge with them nowadays that what is the technology, what are the changes going to happen in over the certain time intervals, and whether the ROI is basically see like this is altogether a finance game, like we all know. Everybody wants to install this solar. Yes, we are very much into the green energy segment, but ultimately the core target is like, are we going to get that ROI as we are claiming 3 years or 4 year or 5 year? So people are definitely trying to understand the technology. If you see, I think the changeover earlier, almost like from last 7 to 8 years, the industry was typically dominated by the polycrystalline modules, and it was consumed like anything. But if you see last 2 years, there has been a drastic change. In the Western countries, I think it was last 3 4 years. But in India, if you see, actually last 2 years, we have shifted over to 90% to the technology. And this is because of the clients, not only the companies, because client has started understanding the product. They want to know what they are going to get offered from the EPCs, from the manufacturers, and how it will help them to reduce their ROI. So definitely people are very much into technology. In fact, many times I'm really happy that people are asking even the difference between the perk and whatever the Topcon which is coming into the market, whether that will be useful, how the warranties and everything will be taken care. So sector is definitely getting aware, and as we know, there is definitely a policy shake always. Some time back, we were knowing that, or rather, we were hearing that only the 10 kilowatt will be the for the net metering will be the cap of 10 kilowatt. So that was a problem situation. But then again, from the center, I think we have got the notification that now it is going forward to the 500 kilowatt, up to the 500 kilowatt. So this has been definitely shifting, and all the states, other states are also accepting it. So people are very much aware of the solar, and mostly the CNI segment. MSE is basically a CMI segment for me, actually, what I look after. So in that, we all know that even the corporates, they are having the unit bill range which is about 10 rupees and above. So definitely for them, the solar is very much important aspect where they can save a lot of cash flow of theirs on a monthly basis, on an operational basis. So they are moving forward with the good technology. And as Sarji said, there are a lot of companies who are offering OPEX solution. They are also trying to tap with the good manufacturers, because ultimately it's going to generate the amount only when it's you're going to get the outcome from that solar plant.
Okay. Okay. Uh, Ramesh, Rohan mentioned about the 500 kilowatt limit. I'll come to that. But before that, I want to understand, as we discussed, there are different types of MSMEs. Manufacturing being the larger ones. There are several other smaller ones as well. While designing the system, while sizing the system, do the consumers also take into account the holidays, for example, Saturdays and Sundays? What would happen to the energy that is being generated? Is there any sort of system size optimization keeping that thing in mind? Especially because now the banking provisions are being they are being diluted now. Attractive banking is not available in all the states now.
See, for the rooftop segment, the most important thing is net metering allowed, not allowed? If net metering is allowed, some states have different caps, the central government advised 500 kilowatt. I recently found Karnataka went up to 2 megawatts. So, it's more advisory. It's for the states to implement. Electricity is a state subject in India. And so different states have different conditions on this. Now, if net metering is there, then you really can generate the energy. If you have excess, you bank it with the electricity board and then consume it later. Now, if you take a state like Gujarat, they have gone the other way and said that if you generate any energy, you have to pay as a duty. Now, some states want to go in that direction, and that can be a dampener because the customer then would say, okay, I'm generating electricity at 3 rupees or 3 rupees 50 paisa. You add this, it becomes 5 rupees. What is my delta? Okay, between what I pay to the electricity board and what I pay to on solar energy. The states like Tamil Nadu don't have a clear net metering policy, right? There it's very clearly said above 100 kilowatt or above for HT, net metering is not allowed. We'll just give you a CAIG. In those states, obviously, you have to consider that there are holidays, and so customer does not get, because you put a zero export device. Wherever you put a zero export device, you're not going to bank anything with the electricity board, so you're just going to lose it. So when you do the economics, you take only the number of days they work for. And so that's how the economics will increase, the payback period will increase in such cases. But, and even then it is still attractive for the customers. And that's why you will find a lot of installations happening in Tamil Nadu even then, because electricity costs are high. And in what you have to also understand is for most of these customers, after raw material, electricity is either the second biggest cost or the third biggest cost. Manpower being the one which is in between. So it is significant, and everybody has a pressure on their price. You ask any industry today, they will say my price is always under pressure. So what can they really control? They can control the cost. And so that's primarily what customers are doing. But if you hear me on all this, you will say, why not then the installations are really, why not everybody is installing? And I think it's primarily due to bandwidth. It's primarily due to prioritization. Yeah, it's okay, I'll do it next year. Can't think of it this year. Yeah, and it's also sometimes the regulations, because some states, it becomes quite difficult for the customer to really envisage which way it is going. And so then they tend to stop and they think, okay, let this get clear before I take a plunge into it, because it's a sizably big system, right? I don't want to have a system and then I'm not allowed to generate electricity. That becomes a nightmare, right? So that's how it goes. Yes, policy, one of the things which in some other panel, I said, it would be great if the electricity board were to come and say that this is my 5-year policy, and then remain with it so that it gives some sort of consistency for the customer.
Okay. You mentioned net banking not being available makes a huge impact. Uttar Pradesh doesn't offer net metering to any non-domestic consumer. Have you seen, so what kind of market trends have you seen from Uttar Pradesh? And what kind of system configuration are consumers generally going for in that state?
See, as far as the system configuration is concerned, the only thing that changes is you put a zero export device or a reverse protection relay to ensure that no energy goes back. That's all. Customers are still doing solar in UP. It is all about what are they paying for electricity and what would solar give them. Okay, if solar gives them a 3 rupees per unit, or a rooftop is the cheapest way of doing solar because there is no other charges. So if it gives them 3 rupees as against 7 rupees or 8 rupees what they are paying, they would still look at it and say, okay, I'm losing 60 days because I'm not working maybe all the Sundays. But still it is worth for me because that may increase the payback or the unit rate from 3, it may go to 4. But still my delta is pretty good. Right, so customers will go for solar, even if there is no net metering, and that has been my stand always.
Okay. And any customers have inquired about storage?
Not. I don't see storage as far as CNI is concerned is a slightly bigger subject, because a customer who wants to have storage ideally would say, I don't want to have a generator, right? Because generator is the competition for the storage. Generator is what gives him but a generator would cost very much lesser than what storage would cost today, right? So unless the storage cost comes down, and I would say if it has to come lower than the lead acid rates, I'm sure it would come one day, and that day may not be that far off. I would see that a lot of people would go for storage. As of now, storage is more in the residential space, where people would go for a hybrid system where they would put storage or a backup power system. But then once the lithium batteries prices come down with more adoption with EV and all, I'm sure that a day will come where storage will become. And India doesn't have a peak pricing policy. Most states have a very small, peak hours. Maybe you can do 150 paisa more or something like that. But that's not enough to justify storage.
Right.
It's more the utility scale where they are trying with storage.
Ashutosh, Ramesh mentioned that the last few months have been very good in terms of demand. Do you agree with that? Have you seen such trends as well? So should we assume that the recent increase in component prices haven't had any impact on the market?
I agree with Ramesh. We have seen one of our best Julys ever in terms of business, both on the machine financing as well as on rooftop solar. August has been good. September, of course, traditionally has been a good month because of half-year financial year ending. People take assets because of for depreciation purposes also. So that trend continues. I agree with Ramesh. The first quarter was a bit of a damper. Of course, April, May was the full impact of the second wave. But July onwards, we've definitely seen an uptick in the market. We are almost, we were not so much active in the rooftop solar business pre-pandemic. We started somewhere in November 2020. And those were baby steps that we took then. But I think overall, the economy, overall the activity at the MSME level seems to be back to pre-pandemic levels. It's just that, one point which I wanted to make is this could have been a bit more different if there was no pandemic, because people still are not sure about the third wave. There is a little bit of uncertainty. And as Ramesh mentioned earlier, people prioritize, right? And that's one challenge with the MSME. They prioritize a working capital or a machine or some other asset over rooftop solar. And because of this uncertainty, solar comes down slightly in terms of the priority list. But overall, yes, I think there is a rebound in the market. I think we're seeing good traction in the market as of now.
Okay. And which consumer segments and states do you feel are the most attractive presently? And would those choices change, assuming, let's say, all the states uniformly adopt the 500 kilowatt limit?
I'll answer your second question first. I think yes. I think despite the electricity being a state subject, and I think as far as rooftop solar is concerned, probably there has to be some initiative across states, across political parties to try and come to us in one platform only for rooftop solar, if not for anything else. But I know it's a complicated matter. Every state electricity board has its own financial structure. Some are completely broke, some are doing well. So it's, I think, a slightly utopian idea that I'm talking about. But yes, if there's a uniform policy, it will make a big difference. The markets which we find attractive is Tamil Nadu, which Ramesh talked about. Karnataka is, of course, very attractive. Maharashtra, although there is a bit of a flip-flop there, given the high rates of electricity, Maharashtra continues to be an attractive market. In the north, Haryana, we see there's a lot of traction in Haryana for us. There have quite a bit of proposals there. Gujarat was a very attractive market so far, but I think they've just gone the other way around, and we quite a bit of a pipeline, a sanctioned pipeline sitting out there, and customers not willing to stick their neck out and install a rooftop solar because of this slight ambiguity in terms of policy. But before this, Gujarat was definitely a very attractive state as far as rooftop solar is concerned.
Okay. Rajiv, a very warm welcome to you. So we have been discussing some of the drivers and challenges. In terms of challenges, I would like to understand from you, is awareness of technology regulations a major challenge for SMEs, and how do you want the industry to step in and fill that gap?
All right. Sorry, I came in a bit late because of my, something else. Uh, See, the biggest challenge in front of MSMEs is the resource. They have scarce financial resources. They barely meet with their day-to-day requirements. They are short of credit always. Credit from institutions is not exactly flowing the MSME way. Then the times like COVID or some other challenge, needless to say, anything, affects them. Let me also mention that there's a continuous inflation in various industrial costs. The costs of all raw materials, from steel to polymers, have almost doubled in the last 1 year. And resource is the main constraint, and MSMEs have to choose between where to invest, whether they have to invest in their immediate productivity issues or production requirements or immediate orders, etc. Or they have to invest in something which would give them long-term savings, or in terms of some green energy and etc. So that challenge always remains. So I think this is one of the biggest challenges. Needless to say that there is a solution as well, and just not just one, but a combination of. Uh, the second challenge, if I say, is technology. We are unaware. We don't know which is the latest cell technology, which company is selling the best. In fact, initially, some of us who jump at something innovative or something good, and I would say the first initiators, they became the losers. It's almost like buying the first mobile phone buyer in India. So the first mobile phone buyer, that mobile phone would be extremely costly and with much lesser features. And later that you buy, you get much better technology at much better, lesser prices. Similar is the situation that we've seen in solar and other renewable sectors, that the later you buy, you get a much better technology at a much lower price and with more stability. And so those initial users aren't very happy. Let me admit with you. And therefore, the guidance in terms of right technology selection is extremely important. Third challenge is that small MSMEs, naturally, they'll not get, they'll have to do capex. They'll not get investor companies who would invest in small rooftop installations for, let us say, 30 kVA or 50 kVA. So normally, typically, I've seen that companies look for 100 kVA or 500 kVA plus, the investor companies. So therefore, for the MSMEs, it's about capex. And this brings us back to the first challenge, the challenge of resources, where I would invest my capex, whether in rooftop solar, or some other energy efficient methodology, or in my immediate requirements. So these are the challenges that we saw. However, let me also mention that there are some solutions. One of the biggest solution, which would be the aggregation of demand. If there's an investor who's shy of investing in small 20 kilowatt, 50 kilowatt installations individually, can I collect a group of 100 SMEs and looking at, let us say, 30 to 50 kVA each, and then total it becomes 3 megawatt or 5 megawatt kind of an installation, and individually divided with in, let us say, 100 installations. But then yes, it is a sizable quantity for one. So we did that. And we brought some SMEs together and we aggregated their demand and we started negotiating with some of those investors who would. Then second is bring in for the capex, can I tie up with a financial institution? So fortunately now there are fintech companies, they're logging in, banks like SIDBI, they've come out with special support programs. SBI also has a special program. So there also it comes. Still, typically an MSME has to look for technology elsewhere and then finance elsewhere. So we realized as IamSME of India that we can provide one-stop solution to MSMEs. And it should be a win-win model, both for the supply companies as well as for the user companies. So aggregate the demand, bring in a fintech company or a finance option, give a ready-made solution to people so that they just pay X amount somewhere, and the negotiations and the technology evaluation and everything is taken care of. So this is there. In Haryana, as someone just mentioned, that Haryana is a progressive state in terms of renewable energy, and state has already formulated laws. Some of the laws have already been notified. It is now mandatory for SMEs to have for any industry to have a solar rooftop. At least a minimal of 5% of the connected load must be through the renewable energy methodology. And now we also have a reverse, the metering of the existing of the renewable things. So some of these things are getting streamlined. The state laws are also becoming more and more notified, and as yet not strictly implemented. But then it is something where MSMEs are becoming aware of. So as institutions, I believe this is just the kind of market, where consumers are aware. The government has already notified certain laws. And so all we have to do is, if we can create a forum or a platform where technology and finance, these come to these SMEs, I think this is something, it's ready for a big takeoff. So I'm looking at the coming year 22 as a big leap year in terms of numbers. But till date, we would have, let us say, done it for almost 80 to 100 SMEs. But now is the time when practically we are looking at covering at least 200 or 500 SMEs every year, and in the coming at least 2-3 years, because now the businesses are prospering. Once again, economy is on track. The laws are in place. In the meantime, technology has done much better. People are a bit more aware of environment and other issues. And lastly, there are, even though typically the subsidy things, etc., those things have gone away, and yet there are certain incentives in terms of accelerated depreciation, or in terms of certain energy efficiency related subsidies that come the MSMEs way. So I'm looking at it in a very positive way. I believe that the coming 2 years, 3 years should be a big leap year in terms of renewable energy. Technologies are becoming more efficient. Technologies are becoming much more cheaper and affordable. And fintech companies and other financial institutions are coming there in terms of immediate financing. So I think these are the times when a lot of initiatives can be taken this way.
Okay. Ramesh, I'd like to come to you. So Rajiv mentioned that there are still several SME consumers who are not taking up rooftop solar. Am I right in assuming that there is a big divide within the MSME sector, wherein the larger consumers are able to afford and therefore are adopting solar? They may be they may have better credit rating, and the ones which are smaller, not able to afford, are being left behind. Is that the case?
The one reason to think that the larger, because they get the better impact. Okay, the guy who is consuming a lot of energy, if he changes over to solar, it makes a big impact for him. But we as a company, we do loan sizes from 10 lakhs onwards. So we are talking of 20 or 30 kilowatts kind of size, and we go all the way to megawatts. So we are an SME ourselves. So we look at it, so we understand the SMEs in respect, and we understand the pain points, what they undergo. And we try to see that the solution is more tuned to what they would want. And so we go for smaller systems as well as bigger systems. The reason why you hear more bigger guys going for it is because it makes a bigger impact for them. The smaller guys are also going. There are quite a lot of installations which we have done in the smaller sector. Our average, if I take over a year, number of systems would be around 180 to 200 kilowatts, which means that there are quite a lot of guys who are doing less than 50, and there are quite a lot of guys who are doing more than that. So, it also depends on. I think Rajiv is right to say that their priorities almost dictate as to what they would like to put their monies into, and it's also what they can think about. It's their ability to prioritize, as I say, because their bandwidth is limited to their business and how they want to get that moving first before they think of any bigger investment. And this, whatever said and done, solar is still a big investment for the customer. Even if he gets finance, it's a big decision. So he does take time.
What would be your threshold credit limit which you do not go ahead?
We don't do any credit rating.
Okay.
We just look at the P&L and balance sheet. That's it. Okay. Of a company for 3 years. Yeah. Okay. Our threshold where we would not be able to finance is, say, a company which is loss making for the last 3-4 years, or somebody, because we look at his ability to repay. If he doesn't have an ability to repay, then it becomes a problem, right? So we don't want to get into that situation. So we would look at and see, is he profitable? Or even if he's not profitable, does he have free cash in order to ensure that the EMIs, because you have to remember that this is a cost which anyhow he will incur. Otherwise he has to pay to the electricity board, right? He's going to consume this power. So, but then it's a question. So it's a fine balance when we do that financing. It's a very fine balance on what we have to look at, and it's a little bit of social financing. We have to understand the customer pretty well. It doesn't just go by the typical finance mechanisms.
Right. Ashutosh, do you have a similar system as Ramesh mentioned, or do you have a clear-cut threshold on credit rating?
No, we don't go into credit rating as Ramesh said. So I think probably the common thread is that if you have to be in the SME lending space, you go by credit rating, you will not be in the lending space, as simple as that, right? So I think credit rating is not something that we look at. We generally look at the ability to repay the loan and the intent to repay the loan. Of course, basics like 3 years balance sheets, whether it's the company is growing or not, whether it is profitable or not, what kind of business model does the company have. And the one point which Ramesh said, I just try to build on it. People typically prioritize electricity payments. I made that point earlier, right? This is getting replaced by an EMI. Now, the only thing that we generally have to look at in such a case is whether the SME will survive for the next 3 to 5 years, right? And that's what the emphasis is when we assess any MSME coming to us for a loan. And it is more of assessment based, trying to understand the MSME, trying to understand the person behind that company, because these are individual driven businesses and not corporate structures in that sense. So our effort is entirely directed to these things, rather than only go by what is on paper or in balance sheets or in terms of credit rating.
Okay, so the assessment goes beyond the financial aspect.
Yes. The assessment has to go beyond financial aspects because otherwise we would not be able to lend to a single MSME, right? And mind you, there are some really good MSMEs out there. Our experience has been that MSMEs will default only if the situation is such that they are not able to repay. Willful default or just not wanting to pay money even if they have it is not something that we have seen in the MSME space. So for that, you have to go beyond papers. You have to go beyond the financials as well.
Okay. Ramesh, you mentioned that 40% of your of the capacity is OPEX, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say financed.
Financial.
We don't call it an OPEX. It's a deferred OPEX, deferred CAPEX.
Right. So by OPEX you didn't mean PPA, right?
No, we don't do PPAs.
Right.
It is between 30 to 40%. Last year it went up to 40%, but usually it's around the 30 to 40%.
Okay. And does OPEC exist at all in the MSME market right now?
We do see that there are sometimes small financiers who know the customer very well would tend to do a 8 years or a 10 years on a unit rate basis. But it is not a very structured, it's not replicatable. It's maybe a few guys doing it because he knows the promoter very well, or he feels that, it can be a steady source of income for him over the years. Some of them think that, okay, I'll invest 1 crore, 50 lakhs with this customer and I get better than an interest rate on a monthly basis from him. So that's how their calculation is, which, it is very difficult to replicate and which is very difficult to. So you have to go with some structured method for financing. You can't do that, but there are. Your question is, are there some people who are doing financing? Yes, there are.
So do you see OPEX having a future at all in the MSME market?
See, OPEX, if you look at on a PPA basis, see, OPEX basically you have to do slightly longer term. The biggest challenge with an SME is if you ask an SME owner where you will be next year, he will be able to say 3 years from now. If you ask him where will you be 10 years from now, that's not something which he will have a ready answer for. He can tell you something, but then there won't be any justification for that. So it is not easy. I won't say that they can't do it. If one company wants to risk it, take it, go for it and make it happen, it can happen. But then I'm not seeing it as of now.
Okay. And Rajiv mentioned that aggregation model is something that is being looked into by many SMEs. Is that something you are comfortable with?
Sometimes, see, since we do various sizes of loans, we don't have to have the situation where we had to aggregate so far. When we get into segments of customers, sometimes we get a group coming to us and negotiating for 10 industries together or something like that. That does happen. But the question that we want to aggregate and make it into a 1 megawatt or something with our model has not come up. So we have not seen the need for that. But then there would be, I am sure that a bigger financier would say that, unless it is 1 megawatt, the transaction cost doesn't really work out. So you give me altogether so many customers. Yeah.
Okay. Just one final question from you, Ramesh. So let's say today a consumer comes to you to get a system, a typical size system. From today till the commissioning of the system, how long does the entire process take, including your own assessment and the regulatory aspects that need to be taken care of?
Okay. If you're asking me precisely about finance, it is 7 days turnaround time.
Okay.
Within 7 days, we will tell him whether it's possible or not possible.
Okay.
But we have to get all the documents. And once the documentation, usually it takes about a week for the customer to give all the documents. We have 2 stages in which we collect. The first stage is basically to assess that it can go ahead or not. The second stage is more the execution documents, along with which it has to come. But typically we will be able to turn around in 7 days, max 10 days, if the customer's documents are not very clear.
Okay. And in terms of 100% capex where there is no financing required, how much time does it take from day 0 to commissioning?
No, see, you have to look at it like this. When you say 100% capex, that is for us. It could involve a bank. If it goes to a bank, then the time could vary. It can vary from 15 days to 3 months. I can't put it. All depends on which bank and what's their comfort level with the bank and all these things. If it is pure capex and the customer is sitting with a pot of money and he wants to execute it, then it's pretty fast. But even then, I see that the decision making does take time, because he can use that money in many ways, right? This is not the only way in which he will use it. So usually I have never found SMEs sitting with a lot of money not knowing what to do with it.
Okay. Yeah. Similar question to you, Ashutosh. What is the kind of turnaround time that you have if a customer comes to you today?
See, it's anywhere between 7 to 10 days. The process is pretty similar. I mean, we generally try and tell the customer upfront in a day or two whether we can do the case or not. Because what we understand in the MSME space is that if it's a yes or a no, if we communicate that faster to the customer, at least they know that whether they want to look at one more option or whether my loan is going through or not. But typically disbursements happen anywhere between 7 to 10 days if all the paperwork is in place. Document execution, which is a legal document execution like loan agreements and stuff like that, takes a day or so. So net not more than probably 10 days.
Okay. Rohan, one question from you. You mentioned about shift towards monocrystalline. So what share within the MSME segment does monocrystalline hold right now? And what kind of technology trends do you see over the next couple of years?
See, definitely, if you see the MSMEs, I would say nowadays, because project sizing, what we have heard from all these experts over here, is typically in between ranging from 50 kilowatt to 1 megawatt. And it's majorly getting compared with the polycrystalline first. But we are having the limitation of the different types of the roofs and where we want to accommodate the maximum capacity. So definitely, I would say, as I think in the 2020 or maybe 2021, the share of the mono has increased to as high as literally 75%. Because many a time, as we know, if there is a constraint of the amount, people are not ready to spend more amount on the technology, they will definitely opt for something else. But many a time, people are looking forward to go ahead with the better technology, which can give them the ROI in a longer run. And if I talk about the changeover or the shift over in the technology, so we are hearing a lot of times that a couple of years back, there was an era of around 330 watt peak modules. Then it went to 400. Now we guys are talking about 500, 550. And even some of the people are talking about 600, 700 watt peak. Okay. So the bigger is not always better. If you see the MSMEs, we are going to typically install the different types of roofs. So as a LONGi, we are providing them the solution, which is going to be utilized for their roofs, which will be easier for the installation. And currently, apart from the monocrystalline, what new development we have done for this particular segment is called Topcon. Our new product is introduced in the last June in the SNEC Shanghai, which is having the efficiency of more than 24%. But that product will be available in the commercial market maybe by the middle of next year. Till then, the monoperk technology, which is the best from the LONGi, we are offering to our clients.
Okay. We are almost coming to the end of the session. Rajiv, I would like to give the last question to you. So you mentioned there are several challenges that are faced by MSMEs. Are you working on solving those challenges, working directly with the government? What kind of incentives do you expect being implemented by the governments, and what are your expectations from the different state governments? Rajiv, you are on mute.
Mr. Mridul, you'll have to speak once again.
Okay, no problem. So you mentioned there are several challenges that MSMEs face. Are you in discussion with the state governments to have some incentives implemented for MSMEs which can prompt them to adopt solar?
All right. See, as representative in the MSME sector, we would always be appealing to the government and looking at various incentives, and sometimes justified, sometimes unjustified. But then, yes, we do keep appealing, and fortunately, there are certain incentives which come our way. For example, presently, if I may say, 20% amount is reimbursed to MSMEs for their investments in energy efficiency. Now the focus is energy efficiency. Now this energy efficiency could be in the traditional fuel way, and sometimes by replacement through the solar model. So that comes. Otherwise, by and large, for commercial and industrial enterprises, I doubt if there is any subsidy available from state government. The typical reason being that now it makes more commercial sense to go in for solar rather than looking for subsidies. So once upon a time, subsidies, would really help people move there. But now I think it's all about it's a commercial sense. And so if one has spare resources, I think it is a good investment. And however, the only question is availability of resources, and that is a challenge. So I would rather say that instead of looking for subsidies and something else around, if we create a mechanism that the right technologies and the right credit and the right combination of both, if it comes the MSME way. So I think entrepreneurs, at least the aware entrepreneurs, would definitely take it ahead. Otherwise, there are various incentives in various forms that come to us. Typically, an MSME, has access to almost 1.3 crore worth of subsidies. Only thing is that one has to do something to get those subsidies. For example, there is a subsidy, 50% subsidy up to 15 lakh rupees on modern technology. But the point is, someone has to invest, and it's not about the central government. Most of the subsidies from the central government are now off for the MSME sector. In fact, most of their programs are not there. But different state governments are taking huge initiatives. The government of Tamil Nadu, the government of Telangana, the government of Gujarat, Maharashtra, Haryana. I mean, these are some states where the state governments are incentivizing MSMEs. So not necessarily a subsidy or a discount. I think it's all about coming together. It's commercial sense, and people are negotiating better. Organizations and institutions, associations have a role, and so I think let's not look more at the state governments. In fact, state governments are now making laws, making it mandatory for manufacturing enterprises and commercial enterprises to go for rooftop and minimum 5% of the installation of their connected load, etc. And why not? So in terms of the government, I think let's not look left, right there. I think it's all about looking at institutions, the technology institutions, the credit flow institutions that can enable this faster.
Ashutosh, sorry, just one last question from you. We have seen governments implementing credit guarantee schemes. We saw World Bank, USAID, and SIDBI, I think, as well. Could you tell us what's the status of these credit guarantee schemes, and have they been operationalized?
See, I think the SIDBI, there is no specific credit guarantee scheme for rooftop solar. The CGTMSE scheme, which is there for quite some time for banks. SIDBI is the nodal agency, of course. It resides out of SIDBI. That scheme has been extended to NBFCs also, and of course, the ultimate beneficiary is the MSME. But that's not rooftop solar specific as such. The World Bank has announced that this scheme is in the works and it can become operational any moment. But nothing has been heard so far. I think this announcement was first made in probably 6 months back or so. But we haven't really heard about what is the nuts and bolts of the scheme. How will it work? How will it be implemented? Who will be eligible for it? Because it will have to be channelized through a financial institution, right? So whether NBFCs will qualify, whether it will be only public sector banks or not. So that's not something that we know about as far as the World Bank scheme is concerned. As far as USAID is concerned, we are a beneficiary NBFC of the USAID credit guarantee scheme. But it's a good scheme, but I think ultimately you need to know how to reach there, how to get that scheme operationalized for you. So I would be waiting for the World Bank scheme, or maybe if something SIDBI is planning. But we are partners with SIDBI for quite some time for the machine financing business. We haven't heard anything from them so far for rooftop solar, as I said earlier. So net, I think a lot of work needs to be done here. And whenever a scheme comes out, I think what has to be done is that if you look at only a few banks like a State Bank of India or a PNB, where these schemes are operationalized, it then sort of leaves a huge amount of MSMEs out of the net, because State Bank of India is not going to reach everywhere, right? There are NBFCs like us and financial institutions like which are in this market. They should also qualify for this kind of schemes, so that we try and touch as many MSMEs as possible.
Okay. I'm afraid we are completely out of time and would not be able to take any questions that have been posed by the attendees. But anyways, most of these questions have been answered in some manner within the panel discussion we had. I would like to thank all the panelists for a very insightful discussion. Ankita, over to you.
Thank you, Mridul. And thank you, panelists, for such an informative discussion on solutions for the SME segment. This brings us to the end of our two-day conference. Before signing off, we would like to take this opportunity to thank all our sponsors and partners who made this event possible. A special thanks to WWF India and the Ready Initiative, our strategic partners for this event. Our platinum sponsor LONGi, gold sponsors Tata Power, Jinko Solar and Radiance Renewables. We also want to thank our industry partners, National Solar Energy Federation of India, Indian Wind Power Association, IamSMEofIndia and Indo-German Energy Forum. A recording of this conference will be made available to you on your registered email IDs. We hope you found this conference useful. If you have any suggestions or inputs on the conference, please let us know at market.research@bridge2india.com. Bridge2India will continue to host such knowledge-sharing events in the future, so we hope to see you again very soon. Until then, goodbye and take care.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.